Mario Party Superstars came out a few days ago, and I liked it far more than I thought I was going to. Had the game included just one more board from Mario Party 3, I would have been totally complacent. To be content, I would have liked to have seen all 20 boards from Mario Parties 1 to 3. Is that an unreasonable request? I don't think so. All the boards already exist, just make them look nice, right? Anyway, I don't want to dwell on the what might have been aspect of Superstars, as that'll send me into a 30-minute rant I'd like to avoid. Instead, all I want to do today is discuss how Superstars remade the original boards. The way I'm going to do this is by splitting each board up into 3 sections. Discussing the original board, discussing how Superstars remade it, and then discussing how I would go about remaking the board. Let's get into it. Yoshi's Tropical Island is a good pick for the first board in Superstars. It's an easy board, one that's good for beginners. The original is a pretty average board that played well to the strengths of Mario Party 1's limited mechanics. Slowly traversing the 2 islands as Bowser and Toad constantly switch places is about as fun as that game gets. Genuinely, the only issue I have with this board is that the bridges are only one way. I just find it pretty lame that if you decline to cross the bridge, you have to circle the entire island before you're given the option again. 29 spaces for the left island and 26 spaces for the right, which is far too long. See, generally speaking, I don't think a board should have any section longer than 15 spaces that isn't cut up by a junction. You shouldn't have to spend more than 3 consecutive turns without making a decision on the board. I think that creates boring gameplay for the player. Like, Mario Party boards are at their absolute weakest when you're just strung along for 4 to 5 turns hoping to make any decisions. A game of Mario Party is typically 20 turns, so to spend 20 to 25% of it on one section of the board doing essentially nothing sucks. Even if the junction is essentially pointless, forcing the player to make a decision can create more engaging gameplay. Now, the reason I chose 15 spaces for the cutoff is because the average dice roll in Mario Party is 5.5. 5.5 times 3 is 16.5, which is an ugly number, so I just rounded it down to 15. That gives players a 64.8% chance of navigating a section that long in 3 turns. Of course, this is only my opinion. I understand how aggressively neurotic this line of reasoning is, and I'm not trying to act like this perspective is the correct one, I'm just explaining my thought process so that my alterations to these boards makes more sense. Anyway, I don't have much else to say about Yoshi's Tropical Island because other than the one-way bridges and overall lack of junctions, it works well enough. Superstars leaves the board fundamentally unchanged. Watermelon Island has 28 spaces instead of 29, and Cantaloupe Island has 27 spaces instead of 26, but who really cares? An item shop was added between the 2 bridges on Watermelon Island, and now Bowser can sell a cursed dice block as well as a Bowser tube, both of whom's price fluctuates. And one of the options on the Lucky Space is to half the Thwomp Toll, which I think is pretty neat. Unfortunately, Bowser uses his clown car to switch places with Toadette. He no longer serves, which to me at least is pretty catastrophic. However, the major issue with this board remains unaddressed. Both islands are still one 25 space plus section with only a single junction. The way I would remake the board is by first making the bridges 2-way. That way you have 2 chances to cross to the other island if you wish. We remove these 2 spaces to better show them being 2-way. Leave the tolls as they are, I don't really care. Then, hear me out, we essentially slice both islands in half by adding 1 path here and 1 path here. Not only do these paths allow quicker access to the other island, but they allow the player to avoid Bowser if he and Toad get swapped after you pass the bridge. However, the Bowser/Toad space should be several spaces after the junctions, so you still need to book it before they get swapped again. In order to maintain this race against misfortune, I push the start of the board, the Bowser/Toad spaces, and Boo forward 2 spaces. Functionally, this doesn't really change anything. We'll also add an item shop to each of these newly added paths because I think every board should have 2 of them. And there you have it. This is how I would have remade Yoshi's Tropical Island. Spaceland is one of the best boards in Mario Party 2, up there with Bowserland and Horrorland. It's a gigantic board whose central junction manages to allow quick travel throughout the entirety of it. The 2 main mechanics, the coin beam and speed traps, work well to make the board dynamic. The coin beam, which causes players to lose all their coins across this diagonal after 5 players have crossed the central junction, is some schadenfreude, and the speed traps, which activate on the happening spaces, force players to move across the board. However, Spaceland does have a couple sections which are too long. The section of the board from this junction to this junction is a bit long, and the section from this junction to this junction is just cruel. The cruel section is admittedly broken up by a skeleton key door, but that isn't good enough for me. A section should be broken up by an unconditional junction, not one that requires an item in order to use. Now, are the toll bridges in Yoshi's Tropical Island conditional on the players having enough coins? Yeah, but I can look past toll roads on boards, as it's much more likely that players will have enough coins for the toll than it is that they'll have a skeleton key. Is this hypocritical and just boring semantics? Yeah, kinda. But also, we're talking about a children's video game, so please keep that in mind before you leave any nasty comments. But wait! I hear you say. That first section is only 15 spaces. Very astute, I respond. However, you'll notice that first section is also at the very start of the board, and from the start to this junction is 14 spaces. You shouldn't have to spend more than 2 consecutive turns without making a decision at the start of a game. And while 5.5 times 2 is 11, 10 is a cleaner number, so I stuck with that. That gives players a 64% chance of navigating the opening section in 2 turns. The reason I think the opening section should be this short is because by giving players the option to separate from the pack early on, it gives the game more momentum, more drama, more heart-pounding excitement. With that game theory out of the way, Superstars doesn't alter Spaceland in any meaningful way. Like, actually. I'd say the most devastating change is that you don't get to wear the fun little costumes that you did in Mario Party 2. Truly cringe and bad, and I don't like it. The Koopa Bank only takes 3 coins, which is a little lame considering how many coins are typically in play in Superstars. It does increase to 5 coins during the last 5 turns, which is cool. Had the fee been kept at 5 but increased to 10 during the last 5 turns, it would have been perfect. There are these little pedestals that indicate where the star can potentially move to, which is just a nice little touch. Boo steals coins for free on this board, as well as on Horrorland and Woody Woods. On the original boards, it costs 5 coins to do so, but this is more of an overall mechanical change than a board-specific change. Another mechanical change is that Baby Bowser is no longer on this board or on Horrorland. I do understand his absence though, as you can't only have Baby Bowser on those 2 boards. That'd greatly confuse anyone who hadn't played Mario Party 2. Lastly, the Bowser coin beam will still fire even if no one is in its path. This is really just a waste of time, as on the original board, Bowser wouldn't bother firing it if no one would be hit by it. Now, the way I would go about remaking this board is by adding in 2 little paths. One here, and one here. This path cuts up the first section and allows players to access the central junction much quicker. And then this path cuts up the boring left side of the board while also letting players access the central junction quicker. But because we don't move Boo, you're still rewarded for using a skeleton key on this door. Finally, we move the other Boo to right here and add a second item shop to where the Boo was initially. Boo being here lets players access it after opening this skeleton key door. And then I just think that every board should have 2 item shops. This is how I would go about remaking Spaceland. Peach's birthday cake is, at least to me, the worst board in Mario Party 1, and I have no idea why this was picked for Superstars over something like Mario's Rainbow Castle or DK's Jungle Adventure. I think this is the worst board in that game because it inhibits player agency almost unilaterally. There are 45 spaces straight where you just press the A button and that's it. That's your turn. Fun, right? And even when you get to the Flower Lottery, it's random whether you go to Toad or Bowser. Yeah, there isn't much strategy to begin with in Mario Party 1, but this board has literally none. It's all luck. Press A and hope the Mario Party gods smile upon you. The path to Bowser is too long as well. It's 13 spaces, meaning it'll take you at least 2 or 3 turns to get out. Not only is Bowser already stealing 20 coins from you by going down this path, but you're also losing a couple turns as well. Far too harsh a punishment. And by going to see Bowser, you'll have to pass by the Flower Lottery again. So, doing the math, you'll need 60 coins to buy a star if you're so unlucky to visit Bowser. And then there's always the possibility that by passing the Flower Lottery a second time, you get sent back to Bowser, thus perpetuating the cycle. On the subject of the Flower Lottery, it should be free, since you always have to go buy it. Finally, the happening spaces are such a waste. Unless you have 30 coins, they literally don't do anything. If you do have 30 coins, you're prompted to sprout a piranha plant for that amount, which steals a star from the next person who lands on the space. These spaces are boring because you need at least 30 coins to use them in the first place, and they don't even do anything unless someone else with a star lands on them. Superstars greatly improves on the original board. The happening spaces now come in pairs, with 2 of them corresponding to a single piranha plant. You can now plant a small seed as well as a big seed. The big seed still costs 30 coins and steals a star, but the small seed only costs 5 coins and steals coins from the next player to land on it. An item shop was added, as well as a happening space that lets you go back to the start much quicker. The largest change is that the Flower Lottery has been moved to after the star space. The little Bowser detour puts you right before the star space again, which offsets the punishment of Bowser robbing you quite nicely. Bowser still gives players the Bowser cake, but, like in Yoshi's Tropical Island, can also give players cursed dice blocks. Genuinely, this is a really good take on the classic board. It's still not great, but it does a good job remedying the original. Now, before I show you my remake of Peach's birthday cake, let me just say I'm not happy with how it turned out. I just kind of think the board is fundamentally flawed, and it's hard to fix the board without completely overhauling the entire thing. Without further ado, here's my take on Peach's birthday cake. I know. See, because the flower lottery is the central mechanic, I added one more at the start of the board to create player engagement early on. It would have 4 seeds, 2 that lead to the right and 2 leading to the left. I also completely changed how the Bowser section works. By going to Bowser, you no longer still get to go to the star, but your trek back to start is shorter. Also, for the original Flower Lottery, I decided to make it 10 seeds, only one of which leads to Bowser. I don't know, I just like those odds better. And both Flower Lotteries would be free. 2 item shops are necessary, I think, and by adding this thwomp / any sort of toll, you get to go back to start quicker. I also just got rid of these 5 spaces to shorten the section from the thwomp to the first Flower Lottery. Finally, the happening spaces should have the option to steal coins or stars, but the coin stealing option should be free, because Boo is free in Superstars, and these happening spaces replace Boo on this board. And while I acknowledge the additional Flower Lottery doesn't add real player agency, as it's still just luck at the end of the day, I think it's at least more interesting than 45 spaces of nothing. And adding real agency would have required changing almost the entire board, which I didn't really feel comfortable doing. Again, I'm not happy with how this board turned out, but there we have it. Woody Woods is a fairly average board in Mario Party 3. I enjoy it enough as it revisits and improves upon the gimmick from Luigi's Engine Room, but I don't have much more to say about it. It's completely unremarkable and rather by the numbers. The main issue this board faces is one that every other board we've looked at has had: sections without player input that are far too long. The long sections in Woody Woods are particularly heinous given the gimmick. There are 3 sections where you don't get to choose where to go. If you have to go right at this junction, you're stuck on this section for 31 spaces before you get to choose your next move. If you go down at this junction, you're stuck for either 18 or 20 spaces. If you go here, you have 28 spaces to go, and if you want to visit Boo, you'll be stuck on this path for 23 spaces, which is just pretty lame if you ask me. Of all the boards revisited, Superstars makes the most changes to Woody Woods. Right off the bat, you'll notice that a 3rd Koopa Bank has been added up by Boo, and that the Koopa Bank on the left side of the board has been pushed towards the center. The 2 skeleton key doors have had their directions reversed, and you can no longer bounce off the doors, which I always thought was a fun little mechanic. This mole on the bottom left of the board has been replaced with a 3rd item shop, which is honestly a bit much. There's no game guy on this board either, which is super disappointing. I love gambling and I love Game Guy so much. I don't dislike this remake, I just think that having 3 banks and 3 item shops is a little excessive. The way I would go about remaking Woody Woods is by completely overhauling this junction, turning it into a 4-way intersection that leads back to the first signpost junction. By doing this, players can more easily access the beginning of the board, which just increases the general mobility of it. I'd also add another junction right after this item shop, just to add some variety to the right side of the board. This junction also helps feed back into the overhauled 4-way junction. Then, because the stretch from my new junction to the junction right by start was still 17 spaces, I just said screw it and got rid of these 2 blue spaces. Speaking of the arbitrary removal of spaces, I removed 5 spaces by this mole hut because I think this junction is just kind of boring to begin with. And there you have it. My Woody Woods. Finally, we get to Horrorland. Now, to call Horrorland the best board in Mario Party 2 is a pretty good take. Mario Party 6 wound up using its gimmick for the entire game, so clearly Hudson Soft was at least a little bit proud of Horrorland. And I can't blame them. It's an elegantly crafted board that is by far one of the most complex boards in the series. Certain Boos only being awake during either the day or night is really cool, as are the Womps being frozen at night. Turning the day into night at the mansion and night into day by dancing, as well as the time changing via happening spaces, are fun mix-ups as well. The Mr. Eyes moving players across the board alleviates the difficulty of navigating a board this large. And Big Boo, holy cow, what a mechanic. Being able to steal coins or stars from every other player is pure Mario Party. However, even a heavy hitter like Horrorland has a couple shortcomings, at least to me. First of all, I dislike the Womp at the top of the board. At best, he's a toll to pay in order to visit the topmost Mr. Eye, and at worst, he straight up blocks him. That Mr. Eye is important, as he allows easy navigation between the top and bottom halves of the board. And if the Womp is blocking Mr. Eye, you have to take the long way to the bottom of the map. And once you get to either of these junctions, you're going back to start, no questions asked. Unless you have a skeleton key or visit Mr. Eye, that is. But if you pass Mr. Eye and don't have a skeleton key, you're sent down a 29 space path with 0 input. Superstars, like with Woody Woods, adds a 3rd Koopa Bank to Horrorland, also at the top of the board. The Koopa Bank that was right at the start has been moved down the board a little way, and the Boo directly across from the dancing floor has been removed. A 3rd item shop has been added as well, which I still think is a bit much. And, like in Spaceland, and there's no fun costumes. Not much was changed, but boy howdy is this still Horrorland. Like with my remakes of every other board, I added a couple little paths to Horrorland to break up the more monotonous sections. This path right here makes the right side of the board more engaging, and by moving Mr. I onto this new path, you give players on this side of the board the option to go right back to the top of the board. Mr. I would follow this new path. Then by moving the door at the top of the board to this new path, you leave the other path accessible to players who don't have a skeleton key. But by moving the big boo as well, you still reward players for using their skeleton key. We moved this boo to where the big boo once was because having back-to-back boos is a little too strong in my opinion, but make him active only in the day. We then make the boo at the bottom of the board only active during the night to keep the original balance. We also put a second item shop right here to force players to decide between getting an item and seeing boo. I also just got rid of the womp at the top of the board, as Mr. I shouldn't have the potential to be locked behind an immovable wall. But there you have it. This is my take on Horrorland. I actually had a stupid amount of fun staring at these Mario Party maps trying to figure out how to fix them. While I don't think my remakes are perfect by any means, I think they do at least improve the original boards a little bit. And while I am pretty happy with Superstar's remakes of all these boards, I kind of wish they changed more. Like, Spaceland, Yoshi's Tropical Island, and Horrorland are fun as they are, but I'm more drawn to Woody Woods and Peach's Birthday Cake because they make a lot of little changes to the original boards. Really, because there's only 5 boards in this game, I wanted to see some more ambitious remakes. Whether or not they worked, I would have loved to see a truly remade Spaceland or Yoshi's Tropical Island. See, if there had been more boards, say, all the boards from Mario Parties 1 to 3, then I can see leaving them as is. That would make this game more of a preservation of those old boards, which I could get behind. But when you're only giving us 5, you gotta do more than just regurgitate these 20-plus-year-old boards. I know how Spaceland and Horrorland play, give me something more. I wanted something similar to the retro tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. That game could have just made N64 Rainbow Road HD and call it a day, but then we wouldn't have the jaw-dropping track that they ended up making. Anyway, I won't lay into Superstars anymore because there's no point. Should there have been more boards? Absolutely. And why would they insert minigames from Mario Parties 4 to 10 if they only included boards from Mario Parties 1 to 3? That choice in particular makes this game feel especially half-baked. But why bother complaining? The game's already made, I already bought it, and it's at least better than Super Mario Party, which is all I really wanted. And hey, there's finally a good Mario Party game on the Switch. That's more than the Wii U got. Take care.